When I think of the Philippines, I think of an emerging market growth. It has huge potential.
Radical government can go okay if they take the right advisor or if they take the right policies. But in many cases, there's more possibility that will go wrong.
Apparently the political process is hand in hand with violence, has been for a long time, and that's one of the reasons that they lag behind the other Asian economies.
How do you assess the result of the recent election in political and economic sense in your country and the region?
Good afternoon, everybody. I'm Stephen Sackur. I have been to St. Gallen for so many years, I can't even count them now, but it is such a pleasure for me to be back. And in a moment, I'm going to introduce you to a fascinating and deeply topical guest for a discussion about growth, in particular growth in Asia, in the emerging markets, and where next for his country, in particular the Philippines. But just by way of introduction, first of all, fabulous to see such a great audience. I love the fact it's pouring with rain outside. It means there's nowhere for you to escape to. So I've got you for the next half hour. And I just want to make it plain, this is going to be an interactive session. We are going to have a discussion for 20, 25 minutes or so, and then we're going to open the floor to a few questions before we finish. And I know from you guys that you always have terrific questions, ones that I should have thought of and didn't, so do not be shy. I love the introduction. I am not Crocodile Dundee. I never wear one of those weird Aussie hats, but I do like asking questions. And Cesar Purisima, I'm going to introduce you to now, is the Finance Secretary of the Philippines. He's a man with a great sense of humor. He said, Stephen, I'm not looking forward to this. I'm hoping you've had your breakfast, because if you're hungry, I'm in real trouble. And I said, no, I had a very good breakfast, but I've got a huge appetite and I'm ready for lunch. So, Cesar, first of all, welcome to you.
Thank you.
And I should say, Cesar deserves a massive round of applause, because you know what? He's just come off a plane from Manila, raced here from Zurich airport, and says to me, I have been in a mindset of Swiss time for the last 24 hours, so I am going to be fine. So let's give him a very warm round of applause for just being here on time.
Thank you.
Cesar, we want to talk about your country, which has, frankly, for the last 6, 7 years and more, an outstanding record of economic growth, and you, as Finance Secretary, have to take some credit for that. But I'm not going to give you any credit right now. I'm going to talk about things that are a little more difficult than positive. For any country to deliver sustainable growth, you have to have stable politics. You, this week, have seen your country vote for a new president who makes Donald Trump look like a choir boy. For those of you who don't know anything about Rodrigo Duterte, he's known in the Philippines as the Punisher. He was the mayor of a city called Davao in the south of your country for, I think, 2 decades. He became known for his brutal sort of anti-crime activities, which he summed up by saying that, in his opinion, criminals deserve to be executed, without trial, that is, just executed. And he says that he wants to take lessons that he's learned and policies he's developed in Davao and impose them on your nation. So, you know, it's perhaps easy to laugh about some of the things he said, but how worried are you about the possibility of the Philippines losing political stability?
Well, first, I think you and he will get along well. I think.
I tell you what, he'd be a great. He'd be.
But anyway, the Philippines' system of democracy is copied from the U.S. And we tend to overdo every time we copy. For example, the vice president has a separate mandate as the president. So most of the time we have a vice president and president from different political parties. And the other thing that's happening is also similar to the US is normally when you have many candidates, you need to divide the electorate. And to divide the electorate, you need to take extreme positions. And in today's world of one-liners, some of the things he said apparently caught the attention of many of our people who wanted to accelerate the change in the country. The past 7 years or 6 years, they've realized that good government can actually be good for their own lives. And that's why I think one of the biggest accomplishments of President Aquino is he's changed an apathetic citizenry to one that cannot have enough of change.
But I would read the lesson in a slightly different way. You've delivered 6% and more annual growth rates for a number of years now. You've turned yourselves into, frankly, one of the most successful economies in Asia, judged on that parameter. And yet, far from being content, your people seem angry. Because in a sense, the vote for Duterte is a protest vote. It's a vote driven by discontent and anger. Why do you think there is so much frustration and anger?
Because I think they've seen the potential that a government can actually help them improve their lives. For example, our middle class suddenly now, instead of motorcycles, are buying cars. So for 3 straight years, we've had the car sales up over 20%. In fact, the first half of this year, it will look more like 30%. So we're seeing that the creation of an empowered middle class. But the problem is, the lower part of the social structure has not really benefited as much. When you move the so-called sick man of Asia to now a bright spot of Asia, you don't have a magic wand and then you make everyone much better. It's going to be a journey. And as a result, those that have not really benefited as much are impatient to get their turn.
Should we, in a country like the Philippines, believe in what the Reaganites used to call trickle-down economics? I mean, I about a year ago went to Manila to do some HARDtalk interviews, and we can talk about some of them in a minute. But one of the things I remember most clearly was going to one of the massive slum areas in Manila. And meeting people whose entire livelihood was based on rubbish picking, rubbish collection and recycling. And one family spent their entire days picking the rubbish from fast food outlets and then stripping tiny bits of meat off the chicken bones that had been thrown out and then sort of boiling that up into something they could sell in their own neighborhood and earning pennies. And I think a quarter of your people still live on $1.25 a day or less. Does trickle-down economics work or not? Are those people going to be helped by your very impressive growth rates or not?
Actually, we didn't believe in trickle-down economics. We believe that you have to grow all aspects of the economy. But at the same time, you have to invest in the fundamentals. And that is why during the time of President Aquino, the past 6 years, we've increased what we call the conditional cash transfer program, which is a stipend we give to the poorest of the poor to keep their children in school and bring them to health centers. Our theory is that the youth of the future must have the opportunity to become productive participants in the future Philippine economy, thereby cutting the cycle of poverty. We've also improved our health system. We're now approaching universal health care. We're also improving our education system. So we're addressing the constraints to growth, because there is no one single switch that you can turn on to solve poverty. It is a complex problem. We're also trying to deal with corruption. In fact, the motto of the president is that where there is no corruption, there will be no poverty, or less corruption, less poverty. And to a certain extent,
unfortunately, there's loads of corruption in the Philippines.
Loads of corruption, but less than before. And that is why we have shown that good government can actually be good economics. And the past 6 years has been the best we've had in 40 years.
Why, it's a big statement, but why would I believe, what evidence can you produce for me that you've substantially cut corruption in the Philippines? I mean, right now, you must be aware, as I am, that in London, David Cameron is hosting an anti-corruption summit. And there are serious questions, not just for the developing world economies, but also for the developed world economies, about our real commitment to rooting out corruption. Where's your evidence that you're doing it?
Well, the first is the budget reform that we did. Now it's zero-based, performance-based, and participatory. So we don't start with last year's budget. We go down again to the people as to what they really need. That's the first. Secondly, in terms of projects, we make sure that it's part of a master plan. Before, they build roads anywhere. So sometimes we have a road that's paved for 2 kilometers, and then the next 10 kilometers not paved, because it's in front of a congressman's farm. But now we insist that it is part of our road network. The other thing is we require bidding. We require a work program. So all of these reforms has allowed us to increase our educational budget by twice, our healthcare budget by 3 times. Our infrastructure budget now is 5% of GDP without increasing taxes, except for sin taxes. So we've been able to squeeze more fiscal space by reducing wastage and corruption. But mind you, there's still corruption.
Yeah, and another word that is very topical right now in analyzing the success of economies all over the world is this word inequality.
Yeah.
The gap between rich and poor and whether it's widening. Is it widening in the Philippines?
I think at the start now it's widening, but once we get through this generation of kids that are now going to be more educated, they'll have skills that are better matched with what industry needs. And once we've created an economy that's more attractive to investments down the road, then that inequality will reduce. Because
but isn't that part of the trouble in the Philippines, from my limited experience of it, is that it's an extraordinarily elitist society. You know, you have your families, the Marcoses, the Aquinos, and many others. Maybe the Purisimas, I don't know. Are you a member of the elite?
I'm nothing.
Well, come on.
I grew up in the South. Well, I think the best evidence of change is Duterte. He doesn't belong to the elite. In fact, he doesn't belong to the ruling class in Manila. That's why I'm excited. I am, because
despite all his nutty ideas, you're excited.
It's not nutty. Actually, before the election, I said there are 2 things that I wanted to see. One is a credible process, and 2, a winner that has a strong mandate. I got both. No? And someone that actually...
Sounds like you're auditioning for a job.
No, I'm not.
You want to be... Because you served Arroyo as trade minister.
For a short time, then I asked her to resign because of corruption.
Yeah, that must have gone down well.
Then I lost my job. Yeah.
But okay, for a short time you served Arroyo, and then you served Aquino.
Yeah.
What's your ambition now? Do you want to serve? I mean, you've just said some...
My wife says, find a real job. But kidding aside, there are several things that he wants to do that I really like. No? First, he's pushing for the federal form of government.
He wants to change the constitution.
He wants to change the constitution. Federal, that would improve distribution of resources across the country. Because right now, 2/3 of our economy is in Metro Manila. And I think it's going to be better if we can create more engines for growth. As we speak right now, there are about 20 potential areas that we've developed as a result of outsourcing work from abroad. The other thing that I like is the fact that he's talking about the parliamentary system. From a finance standpoint, where in the U.S. system, you have to defend your budget for a long time before it's passed. I like the idea of having it approved on the first day when the ruling party goes to session. That gives you more time to implement the projects. So, with a strong mandate, with ideas that I think will help the Philippines and with the support of the people, then I think it's good.
Let me ask you a little bit more about the structure of your economy. And I'll very briefly bore you with a little story again from my most recent trip to Manila. I had this really moving experience when I went to a college which is devoted to training expatriate workers who go, as so many do in the Philippines, to work in the Middle East or the rich world, to earn money, remittances to send back to their families back in the Philippines. And this was an extraordinary place where I spent half a day with the group of about 40 young women. They were all women who were all being trained to be maids, housemaids. And they get trained in laundry, they get trained in cooking. And I think it's a state-funded college. And I spoke to them at the end of watching them going through their training. And I asked them all about their lives. And almost all of them had young children who were being raised by their grandmothers because the young women themselves, simply had to go abroad to make a living, to send the money home, to keep the family going. And as they talked to me, more and more of them started crying. Just crying because of they knew that a week or 2 later they'd be on a plane going to Jeddah or to Beirut or wherever. And I had a tear in my eye because it was so sad. Do you want to build an economy where remittances and foreign overseas work is no longer the foundation of your economic strength?
In fact, day one of the Aquino administration, President Aquino said that he wants working abroad to be a choice rather than a necessity. And that's why we're working hard to build a more vibrant economy. And to a certain extent, we've succeeded the past 6 years. The total number of overseas workers when we started was about 10 million.
10 million?
Yeah, now it's down to 9.5
That's
million.
an extraordinary number.
Well, it's been the case for many countries that had no options before. But now, we're starting to see the fact that they are now a source of strength, not just because of the remittances, but because when they travel abroad, they learn new skills, they adopt a global mindset, and then when they come back home, they even come up with some capital. As a result, now the Philippines is the 4th largest shipbuilding country in the world with no steel industry. And our source of competitive strength is the number of trained welders we have that were trained during the construction boom in the Middle East. Our tourism industry is now starting to pick up. When the integrated resorts were opened in the Philippines, 20% of their initial staff came from the integrated resorts in Singapore, in Macau, and some as far back as the US. So as we create a more vibrant economy, they become a source of strength. Our BPO industry has over 1 million people right now. It's growing 15% a year, and this year will bring in $22 billion. In fact, it will surpass remittances next year. The core middle management of that is also coming from Filipinos who've worked abroad, who've developed a global mindset and knows how to work with and be competitive.
You're talking about offshore. I mean,
business process outsourcing.
I have two cliched images of where Philippines' economic strength lies. One is remittances, which you've said it still is an extraordinary foundation of your economy, but also the sort of call center, offshoring, cheap administrative back office functions that so many global corporations have placed in the Philippines, partly because your population generally has pretty good English.
Well,
is that a sustainable part of a growing economy?
It is, because what we've done is we've gone at the value chain. When we started in data encoding. Now we're the number one in voice, but we're not only in voice. In fact, voice is not the big part of it. Engineering support, healthcare support, paralegal, investment banking. For example, Accenture has over 30,000 workers in the Philippines. IBM has over 25,000 workers.
But the point is whether they're really investing all the way up the value chain, or whether they just put their cheap labor operations in your country, which is never going to allow you to mature your economy.
No, they're not cheap. They're skilled workers. Because, for example, when you look at the Accenture team, it's not just voice. It's IT people, it's system people. In fact, a lot of them travel to actually help implement the programs of Accenture. So I think what we've done is to learn from the experience of India and move up the value chain, to decentralize it across the country. So we now have about 15 or so locations in the country, and really work well with industry to make sure that our schools are producing the skills that they need, to the extent that a lot of them have moved their training to schools. So it's a win-win. The schools actually improve their products. At the same time, the company save on training, so that when they bring in the people, they already know the systems.
You make the Philippines sound like the most fantastic place to invest.
Well, 6.2% the past 6 years is not bad.
You should definitely be in the corporate video market, because you do a great job. But here's the thing: if you look at the international sort of economic situation right now, I think it's fair to say that the rich world and the investors who have the money in this world are beginning to doubt the sustainability of the emerging market model. And we've seen the BRICS. I mean, you're not a BRIC, obviously, but look at Brazil. Obviously, Russia has its own problems. Slowdown in China. There is a concern that 5, 6, 7 years ago there was so much faith in the never-ending potential of emerging markets. Do you think that faith is now in question? Do you feel that from the Philippines?
Well, first, there are different types of emerging markets. There's not just one
Of course.
category. The only thing I think that's common is the fact that from a demographic standpoint, most of these countries are young. In fact, we're the youngest in Asia. There are those that are resource-driven. We're rich in resources, but we're not dependent on resources. In fact, the one driving our economy is consumption, and we're trying to balance it with increased investment. No? So I think emerging markets will have to go down to the basics, no, of improving their fiscal and macroeconomic condition, addressing the structural constraints to growth, such as infrastructure, education, healthcare, inward-looking policies, connect the country to the global supply chains and to the tourism flows and that's what we're trying to do. But obviously, in a democratic system similar to the U.S., no, it can be a bit unwieldy. So it cannot happen overnight. For those of you who are not very familiar with the Philippines, 50 years ago, we were number 2 to Japan. In fact, in the early 60s, our total exports was greater than that of Korea and Taiwan combined.
Wow.
So we fell a long way. So you cannot just change it overnight with 6 years. Now, I think we've had a good start, no? But we need several more 6 years where we can really create a new generation of more confident citizens and more skilled citizens.
As you try and develop that ambition and really raise Philippines' game, do you worry about the sort of geopolitical context in Asia? Because China is now so dominant in Asia and frankly sees itself as the regional superpower, and in all sorts of different ways, territorial disputes, trade issues, China does appear to want to impose its will to a certain extent across Asia. Do you worry about that?
Well, yes, but I'm comforted by the thought that the relationship among countries have many dimensions. We have an issue on territories, but our trade is quite healthy. In fact, the past 3 years, it's grown an average of more than 15%. Our tourism has room for improvement. Investment has room for improvement. So I look at China as an upside. I'm also comforted by the thought that China doesn't want a China Sea that is in conflict, because it is where over 50% of global trade passes. So it needs,
No, but it wants peace and stability on its terms. And then we look at a character like Mr. Duterte, who says all sorts of contradictory things about China, and you wonder whether, again, in the context of you wanting to deliver sustainable growth, whether the geopolitics of the next few years might make that quite difficult. Tensions don't help.
Well, I think this would be a natural reboot of the relationship. New personalities, there's an opportunity to have a fresh start and to really talk about how we can come up with a win-win solution to this issue, similar to what the UK and Norway did with the North Sea, for example. So there are precedents on how to address this, but I think I'd like to look at this as an opportunity rather than a problem.
And one other thing that fascinates me, and it maybe is a model for other growing emerging market economies too, is the degree to which your growth, and it has been pretty spectacular growth over the last 6 years, is changing your society in lots of different ways. One way, when I was there, that I was looking at it was the reach and the power and the influence of the Catholic Church. I think over 80% of your population describe themselves as very observant, practicing Catholics. And that has had a big impact, for example, on reproductive rights and the availability of contraception and things like that. And the last government confronted the church, trying to get much more sort of wider use, particularly amongst the poor, of condoms and contraception. Is growth changing the Philippines in that sort of cultural society sense?
Not just growth, but it's happening at the right time for us. It's happening when people are more empowered with access to information through the internet and mobile telephony. It's happening when we have a large population that's outside the country, that's seeing how things are done, and that's bringing them home to their children and to their families and changing their expectations of how things should be. It's happening when we have generally a young population that has their whole futures in front of them, and they want to take hold of that. And I think the election was just an example of that desire to really have a better life.
But do you think you're losing things as well as gaining things in terms of, just the spirit and soul of your country? I don't want to sound too romantic about it, but do you know what I mean? I mean, as you become more internationalized, more part of a globalized world, is there something that you fear you might lose in the Philippines?
Well, if we lose corruption, I don't really
No,
mind.
believe me, corruption's a globalized industry. It's not just yours.
Well, with AMLA and FCPA, I think it helps weak countries with weak institutions. But one of the things that I treasure the most in the Philippines is the strength of the family as an institution, and that's as strong as ever, to the fact that we are fun people. In fact, our slogan is, "It's more fun in the Philippines." In fact,
you're going to tell me about karaoke in a minute, aren't you?
In fact, one of our problems is that sometimes we even laugh at our own problems. That's why we don't get it solved. So, but anyway, I think the fundamental things of what makes the Philippines, and is still there. It's a country that really is the meeting point of the East and the West, having been under Spain for over 400 years, under the U.S., but is right in Asia. So we'd like to see ourselves as a bridge, a gateway.
No, well, I can testify to the fun bit. I mean, Filipino people are fantastic, incredibly warm and friendly and positive. So, because I can hear, is that somebody's phone that's talking to me? Anyway, listen, I want to open it up now to questions from you guys, because I know that I always get great questions. So we've got up to 10 minutes for Q&A. Let's start over here and then we'll work around. But so there's a microphone coming. Yep, keep your hand up and you get the mic. There you go. Tell us your name and a quick question.
Ludo from South Africa. It is easy to understand that there are some arguments that your new president is a monster. However, do you feel that sometimes people criticizing your people in the way they vote is direct criticism on your people's ability to choose their own future, which is definitely unfounded? To say this is the leader that we want as a democracy, and this is the voice that we choose and the leader that we choose. Do you feel that people looking in are missing that?
I think even us, a lot of us were misinformed. But I think the only basis to judge how he'll behave is what he did as mayor of that city in southern Philippines. It was a killing field when he took over. And it's now one of the more progressive cities in the Philippines. So I don't have a basis of saying that he's not going to be a good president simply by basing on his track record. And then combining it with what he wants to do, plus the mandate that he got, I'm hopeful.
Do you find outsiders' views, maybe particularly from sort of the international media, can be quite patronizing?
Well, exaggerated by the fact that we have a media that's overly free.
In the Philippines, you mean?
In the Philippines.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, that's a good thing. Don't lose that. Right. Next. There's a lady in the middle, but that's probably quite awkward for the microphone. Yeah, go for it. Keep your hand up, ma'am, and give us name and quick question.
Hi, my name is Jenny. I'm from Vietnam. So I would like to ask you a question, maybe a little bit politically incorrect. Or
that's good. We like
controversial.
that. That's fine.
So I would like to call what you call the China Sea as the East Sea. And the Philippines has been quite vocal about tensions surrounding the East Sea more than any other ASEAN countries. And this confidence comes from the strong political relationship with the US. Do you think that this political worry partly contributes to the win of the new president, who places great importance on keeping domestic safety?
Well, first, I think it's important that the relationship among countries is guided by the rule of law. And when it comes to the issue of the sea, there is a convention of which the Philippines and China are both signatories, which is called UNCLOS, for short. No? And we thought that the best way is really just to ask an independent body to give us guidelines on how to deal with the conflicting claims, not just between the Philippines and China, but with Vietnam and several other claimant countries. Then ASEAN, the group of 10 countries, of which the Philippines is part of, is also trying to come up with a code of conduct. No? So I think once there is clarity on this, no, this will help us all in the long run. In the short run, especially when the press zeroes in on this, no, it's basically Philippines against China. It's a difficult situation because it's a lose-lose situation politically. We cannot give in, neither can they. I think in the end, I'm not the foreign secretary, but I'd like to see it put on the side and we agree to disagree and then focus on the other dimensions of our relationship, guided by clarity on the legal status.
Okay, we've got time for a couple more. You, sir, we'll get a microphone to you.
Mr. Zuka, may I ask even more politically incorrect question, and because it comes to you?
No, you can't ask me questions. That's ridiculous. I refuse.
It comes to his... see, your questioning is probably coming with a shaded glass of the Western view. I think when you say Philippines 6.2% is not good enough, or China, Russia, and Brazil are going down, look at it in comparison to the rest of the world.
Sure.
Look at India. I'm from India, so I'm saying it. 7.5 sustained growth. We feel it's bad when it becomes 6. So isn't the growth coming from the Asia and will continue to come there?
Very fair point. Can't argue with the figures. I don't know if you want to... I mean, there is a there is a point that you know, we talk about, fears of a China slowdown when they're still delivering 7% growth. You guys are still delivering 6.2% growth. Do you think you don't get the credit you deserve for continuing to be the motor for the global economy, for growth in the global economy?
Well, the Philippine economy was once described as a jeepney economy. I don't know whether you know about jeepneys. So these are, vehicles that go 40 kilometers on rough roads and 40 kilometers on smooth roads. So we just go chug along. And we've been continuing to grow, but at a very low rate, averaging about 4.5% the past 20
But believe me, as the
days.
questioner says, 4.5% sounds bloody marvelous if you live in Western Europe.
Yeah, and that is why we're celebrating 6.2%. But we're not stopping at that. In fact, our aspirational growth rate in our plans is to move it up another notch to 7 to 8%. And we need to continue to address structural constraints. For example, our infrastructure. We need to close the infrastructure gap between us and our neighbors. We need to be better connected.
And your traffic in Manila is horrible.
Our traffic, because we're selling a lot of cars and there's not enough roads.
Exactly. All right.
That's an opportunity.
Yeah. One more, I think. Yeah, we've got time for at least one more. Ma'am, you got your hand up. Keep it up and we'll get you a microphone.
Hi, my name is Kimberly. I'm from the Philippines. And I think this conversation just showed how important international relations are to the Philippines and international investment. And I unfortunately don't share your hope and excitement for Duterte. I think I definitely see how much progress he made in Davao. I think it's great that he eliminated crime. But at the same time, his only experience is Davao. Duterte has never held national office, nor has he had any experience in foreign relations. And I just wanted to ask you what your opinion is on this and how you can remain excited when he has basically told the US and Australia that he would cut ties with them and basically told China that he would jet ski to China and like plant the Philippine flag.
Yeah, you see, I told you we'd get better questions from the audience than from me.
Filipinos are naturally critical.
Yeah, great question. Thank you.
You know, you don't have to be an airline pilot to run the best airline of the world or to be a doctor to run a good hospital. All you need is the mandate as well as the recognition that you need to hire good people. And I think he has the mandate, and he recognizes that he needs to bring in good people to help him run the country. In a democracy, you know, especially the US-style direct election democracy, it's hard to get the best CEOs, no? Because they're boring. No? They won't ever win an election. But A president who recognizes he needs them and brings them in to the right position will make a difference. So I think, and that is why I'm hopeful, because he said so, that he wants to bring in good people. His comments during the election, I think, is clearly just dividing the electorate. And he said so. He promised now he won't curse again. No. He promised not to curse. So far, the past few days, he's maintained that. No? So we'll watch whether he walks his talk.
Interesting. We will definitely watch. By the way, for all you CEOs in the room, you're not all boring. I mean, one more. Let's go for one more, and then I think we're probably going to have to wrap. But you, sir, you've got your hand up. We'll get you a microphone. Have you got a mic? No? There you go.
Hi, I'm Sulakshana from Sri Lanka, a comparable economy, I'd say, to the Philippines, plagued by corruption. In your talk, you mentioned that the Philippines has taken many measures to curb corruption domestically. But in the backdrop of the Panama Papers, do you not think that corruption is now a more global issue, and should countries be doing more at an international level to curb this plague?
I fully agree. That's why I've been selling the idea that countries should adopt a global convention on tax identification numbers, similar to cell phone numbers, where my tax number will be recognized in Switzerland, will be recognized in the UK without having to apply for it. Structured such as a cell phone, where the first two numbers is the country and so on and so forth. And then there will be data sharing and mutual recognition. So every time you move money or property, you must have a cell phone number or a global tax ID number. If we are serious in fighting illicit flow of money and the flow of corrupt sources of fund, we have to adopt it. In fact, I presented this to Prime Minister Cameron when he called for a meeting prior to their hosting of the last G8 meeting. It's a simple idea that I think will make it so difficult.
And transparency is really important. I mean, do Philippines politicians, senior government officers such as yourself, do you all declare your assets, your personal wealth? It's all out in the public domain.
It's all out in the public domain, but it hasn't been as effective because, as I kid some of my friends, some politicians wear their statement of assets and liabilities. It's just their watch and their suit. So it's that, badly understated.
Yes.
And therefore, I think
that wouldn't be you, though, would it?
No, not me.
No.
I don't have that watch. It's just Fitbit.
You've got a Fitbit, huh?
$200.
All right. I've really enjoyed this conversation. I guess what we've picked up from this, apart from learning an awful lot about the Philippines and about your concept of growth and sustainable growth, is that you're definitely not going to serve Mr. Duterte, and you're available for hire. If there are global consultants in the room, you've got a finance minister with a great track record here, so, maybe you need to get together. But, ladies and gentlemen, we're out of time for this particular discussion. Please end by giving a very, very warm sign of appreciation to Cesar Purisima. Cesar, thank you.
Thank you, I enjoyed it.
Thank you very much. Thank you.